welcome or welcome back to the woes knitting podcast, formerly known as the Night Sky Knitting Podcast. My name is Rachel. I am a knitter in Ottawa, Canada, and this channel is my chatty outlet to talk all things knitting with occasional appearances by other crafts. Today's Saturday, September 16th, and it's been a little over 3 weeks since I filmed one of these, which seems to be my natural filming schedule. And I have a lot to go over. I seem to have these boom and bust cycles with having finished objects. I have a schedule of filming, of starting a bunch of things at once and then finishing all of those things. So it means that every other episode I have like 5 finished objects, and then the alternating episode I have maybe a sock. But today I have 4.5, as well as some new crafts going on and some transitional knits, which have been really nice, but I've got a lot to go over, so I should really just get started. And the very first thing I have to show you I'm wearing, it's my rib lace raglan by James and Watts. And I knit this in a fingering weight yarn. It's Ovis etc. Igne in the color Pebble. And I really like this finished object. I wasn't sure about the beige color. I'm still kind of unsure about the beige color and might at any moment decide to dye this red or green, but for now I'm happy with it. It's a little bit more see-through on camera than I feel that it is in person, but I mean, it's a all over lace t-shirt. Like I did know what I was getting into. The pattern does call for a sport weight, and I've seen a lot of people modify the look of it to either be a bit more conservative and have higher coverage by just knitting it same gauge, same everything, just on a DK. And then I used a fingering weight. This is a 60% wool, 20% silk, 20% rami, which is a paper fiber blend, and it's been pretty perfect for this. I used every single inch of it, and I actually unpicked the bind off. Sorry, I'm gonna squat so you can see the full thing before I start talking about knitting it. Yeah, so I used every inch of this yarn because I wanted to for this project. I actually unpicked my original body bind off to add another 2 rows when I had enough yarn to do so left over from doing the sleeves and the bind offs, but I really like the overall fit and look of this. I got what I wanted. The one thing that's kind of annoying is that there's no short row shaping in the back, so it is just a smidge choky, more in theory than in practice. I noticed it the first time I put it on, and then it doesn't really bother me for the rest of the day while I wear it, and I have been wearing it because it's been really good for, you know, those early spring or early autumn or late spring or early autumn days where it's really cold in the mornings and really hot in the afternoons and then really cold in the evenings again, or cold in the shade, hot in the sun. This has been really good for that. I think that the blend of fibers and this very lacy pattern has let it be very temperature regulating in a way that I personally appreciate as a certified sweaty woman. I also, the first thing my boyfriend said when I finished this and I wore it was how much he liked the bind offs, which is really just a plain bind off for both the sleeves and the hem, and I actually do think it looks really nice and adds to it. It's a really thin I-cord neck collar edge, which is also really cute, but I did, even though I picked up more stitches than the designer recommends, it's still quite tight and I can't wear my glasses or have my hair in a bun as I yank this over myself, but I think that that will loosen up with time. I knit a size up from what was recommended for my bust size because my gauge was a little tight, which is the first time that's happened in a while, which is really nice for me. More on this later, but I'm turning into a looser knitter, which I think is really good for me, but I knit this a size up from what I would if I was on gauge and following the recommended ease, and I think that was the right call. I got exactly what I wanted. This is a really fast pattern. It's meant to be an 18 stitch gauge, which on fingering or sport or DK is pretty fast. And it's a really easily memorizable repeat. It's only 2 rows. It's super fun, it's interesting, but you can still pay attention to other things while you're doing it. And I recommend the pattern. It was clear. The one thing I would have liked was, I think, maybe final stitch counts. I'm wondering, I've been knitting so many different patterns lately that I do think that it's true that the designer didn't put final stitch counts after like sleeve and body separation, which was a little nerve-wracking for me, but everything lined up in pattern and I'm very happy with it. The only other thing is that because it's such a loose gauge and a light colored yarn, I found it a little tricky to weave in my ends in a way where they felt both secure and also not visible in the final garment while wearing it. So I'm just gonna treat this very carefully and hope that they don't unravel, but I really like it. I've been wearing it. It feels like it goes with a whole bunch of different things in my wardrobe, including my beloved thrifted red corduroys, and it feels like a vote of confidence in James's pattern style, writing style, and makes me more likely to cast on more of their work in the future. So 2 thumbs up on this one. My next finished object, I have been able to knit a lot more in the last 3 weeks because first I was sick with a really mild cold, but that lasted a while. And for the 2 days that I was like really out of it, I only wanted something plain like this, just knitting back and forth with some garter eyelets. And then I finished my job and took a week off before starting my new contract. So then I had some vacation knitting, which was really pleasant. And then I was stress knitting because my start date was delayed for stressful reasons outside of my control. And then now I'm in isolation waiting to see if I have COVID. So I've had a lot of time to knit. Some of it has been stress knitting. Some of it has been on the train, listening to an audiobook, watching the beautiful scenes of early autumn in Ontario out my window. But the point of all this is I have a lot to show you. My other thing is this Age of Grass and Steam kerchief, which is a free pattern on Ravelry that I favorited back when I first got Ravelry, so clearly my tastes haven't changed that much because I got this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful skein of Canadian Angora yarn from Twist Fiber Festival. It was 40 grams. It's 70% Angora from rabbits, 30% merino, and hand-dyed. And I loved it. It's so incredibly soft. I love that at fiber festivals you can get like local Angora yarn. I was talking to the producer who makes it. Her brand name is La Dame aux Angora, aka the Angora Lady. And she was like, yeah, I hand dyed it. Yeah, it's my rabbits. Oh, I get it milled at this place in, I think she said New Hampshire or Pennsylvania. And I was just like, this is so much information that you're volunteering that I love to know about the provenance of this yarn. And I got it, and I knew that I wanted some type of shawlette with it, a little kerchief or something for in the office when I get cold. I can just drape this over my back and over my front. Oh wait, moving my hair is actually less useful in this case. It doesn't go very far back, but that was what I was going for. It goes like that. It really is a mini shawl, but not quite like a Sophie scarf level of mini, and it's kind of the perfect size. I stopped a few rows before the final repeat of the kerchief size because I simply ran out of yarn and actually used some of the yarn from this to finish the bind off. But I'm really happy. I like this triangle shape but smaller because it makes me kind of feel like I'm in a Boy Scout uniform and I can just go like this. And it's really nice for when it gets too cold in the office, but I don't want to be wrapped in a full cardigan or one of those bigger shawls that's more of a statement. And it's just so cute. It feels a little bit more casual and still also less obvious, so therefore a bit more professional. Not that shawls are unprofessional, but sometimes when my manager would walk by and I was like wrapped in my blanket scarf at my desk like a gremlin because it was so cold, I mean, she'd laugh because she felt the same way and understood, but I also felt very much like the student in the office TM. So having something a little bit more subtle like this makes me happy, but I also still feel like a little kid in my little scout scarf. It's also good for on the way to and from the office in the mornings when it's chilly, because I can just wrap it around like a regular scarf. I have the room to do so. I love this color, and it's so nice to have it against my neck because Angora is simply the softest fiber in the entire world, maybe? And I have it like a little bandana, and I like it. And this color has been my autumn, I guess late summer, early autumn obsession. I talked about this in my fall knitting mood board and inspiration and pattern plans video, and you're gonna see 2 finished objects, 1 work in progress and 1 swatch, all in various shades of this blue in this episode, because apparently I wasn't kidding when I said Stormy Lake Blue is my color for this fall. But this was, I think, the thing I finished first since filming the last video, and I'm thrilled with it. It blocked beautifully. It's a sport weight, and I knit it on, I think, 5mm needles, and that halo and that fuzz meant that it bloomed so well. It filled the stitches. It meant that I was able to get a lot out of 140 meters of yarn, like a whole little shawlette, which I didn't expect to get this far with it. It's appropriately long for what I want. I can't even fit it in this whole video if I go like this. And I don't know, I've favorited a whole bunch of other shawls or scarves in the past, but this is the first one I've ever actually made for myself. And it's such a basic one and it's a free pattern, but it was really fun to knit, especially when I was sick and wanted something to do with my hands but couldn't comprehend I made so many mistakes in both this and my Florencia tea those 2 days that I was like out of it sick, that I just had to put that down and work on this and also my other half-finished object, which is a pretty simple sock. So this pattern, it comes in a bigger size as well. It would also be super easy to modify and make it bigger. You would just keep doing the repeats, and it talks about how you could do that in the pattern, but I'll link it down below. I think it's a great free pattern, and I thought that for a shawl I would want something more complicated to knit in terms of texture, not in terms of color, but this was perfect. Cast it on at the perfect time. It was great. Really happy to be wearing it and to have more of it, and to have more opportunities to wear it in my new office, and also because it's autumn. So from there, like I said, I was sick and kind of out of it, and I wanted something that would bring me a lot of like easy joy, like base level joy in the form of bright colors, something that would be comforting in the form of nostalgia, and also just a really easy all stockinette knit. So I cast on a pair of socks using my Spirited Away yarn that I got in Melanie of Big Little Yarn Co.'s Studio Ghibli Season 1 pre-order. And this is The Empty Restaurant, and this is Riki. So Nathan came to visit me. I actually caught my cold from him. And I cast these on while we watched Spirited Away, which was really nice, comforting, really like that movie. It's very good, so does Nathan. And then I kind of put it to the side and then immediately got sick. So these are the Porch Light socks from 52 Weeks of Socks by Lina Magazine, Volume 1. And I talked about this again in my planning video saying, maybe I'll get around to it, but probably not. And then thought, no, you've been hoarding all these beautiful sock yarns and saying you're gonna knit socks with them. Put the garments down, Rachel, and knit the socks. And so I did. I thought that the contrast would show up more in the color work. So this is pretty much an entirely vanilla stockinette sock, except for this texture, and it's hard to, okay, hold on. Except for this lace and color work motif right here. And I did think it would be a little bit higher contrast. I thought that this beautiful, moody, lilac-y color would fade in more with this, or I guess maybe stand out more, so it had a bit of that ethereal, ghostly haze for the moths. And it kind of didn't, but I still really like the look of it, and I don't regret this choice of yarns. I do think that the high contrast ones, where people choose like a black or a navy for this, and then an orange or a yellow or a red for this, are also really pretty, like in the sample in the magazine. But I'm happy with this. And this was my I have a cold knit. And it's 1x1 color work up here and down here as you fade into this moth. And then you have these really cute little moths. And these are my first time doing baubles. I didn't do a very good job. Some of them are more bobbly than others. And so I might go through and follow one of the tutorials for making your baubles stand out more for the ones at the front of the sock, not at the back of the sock. And I also knit this longer than I normally knit my socks so that they're properly winter socks and there's no skin on my leg showing if I sit down in winter. That's uncomfortable and I don't like it. But I also, because I was sick, made so many mistakes and had to go back so many times while making these. It's not a complicated motif. I just like could not focus. But I really enjoyed this motif, and then I really enjoyed the miles and miles of stockinette while I just listened to an audiobook and blew my nose a bunch. Sorry if that's gross, but I had a cold. And this was great because I find these colors just so beautiful. And as a result, they provided a lot of entertainment, not entertainment, but they held my attention enough, but then I couldn't mess anything up because it's all stockinette. Once I got to the final foot count, you can see it had this patterning kind of established on either side. Maybe I'll just flip it. Where you can see it's almost stripy. I also enjoy that, but I love this blend of colors. I think Melanie's a genius, and it does feel, to me, evocative of the movie, and I like it. So that is my half-finished object, my sickness cast on. I have cast on and just done a single row of the rib for the second sock so that it's on the needles and I will just pick it up when I feel like it. But I have a couple other things on the needles right now that I think basically until I'm done a couple of my lots of ribbing projects, it's going to be a little while until I finish the rib for that, but I imagine soon I'll want to do the color work and the moth motif, and then from there it'll be just train knitting, bust knitting, Zoom call knitting, etc. So that's my half-finished object, the porch light sock. Quite lovely. Oh, well, it was bound to happen. Oh yes, next finished object. Socks were just really good while I was sick, so I finished my DK weight laid edges socks, except for the ends have not been woven in fully, as you can see. I wove in some of them, but not all. And this is in Rose Hill Yarns Aspen Fur sock set. It's a DK weight sock. I accidentally knit these too big, but that's okay because I'm going to be wearing them with cotton socks underneath for really cold day boot layering. These will be boot socks or they'll be slipper socks around my house. And they're really, really pretty and they were fun. It has this cable going down each side that I think is very fun to make. I think they're pretty. I love green, it's my favorite color. And I love a little contrast cast on. So I'm happy. And they were fast, they were comforting, they were a good energy boost to keep finishing things, and they feel like a good way to welcome in autumn. But yeah, I wasn't paying enough attention, and I think my row gauge might be off compared to the designers because I started doing the toe decreases as described in the pattern, and it was so much longer than my foot. I think in hindsight I should have just ripped back one of the pattern repeats and then done the toe, but I wasn't thinking. So I have a much shorter toe for these socks than, and a wider one than I meant, or that I would normally do when I'm doing my own sock toes, but that's okay. It doesn't affect the wear of it, and they're big enough anyway that it's not like boxing anything in. I would try them on, but they're still a little bit damp for blocking. I took the time to block these while I had a couple swatches blocking last night, and I figured why not waste. Sorry, I didn't want to waste the soapy lukewarm water for washing the swatches. So yeah, I also finished those socks. They were really fun. Also a free pattern. Also something I had favorited since I first started on Ravelry. And I'm happy. So my next finished object is probably one of the more exciting ones. And it's my Florencia tee by Claudia Q of Unit Toronto, which is a yarn store that I frequent, and they sent me this kit and the yarn and the pattern for free in exchange for talking about it on my channel and knitting it to promote their Florencia Tea knit along. I didn't finish this in time for the knit along. It ended at the end of August, and I got this at the very end of September, and it's a fingering weight lace t-shirt, and I just didn't finish it in time, but I still really like it. It was fun, except for all the times I made mistakes, and I'm gonna put it on for you guys right now. Oh gosh, this is showing up more see-through on camera than I was expecting. But this is my Florencia tee, which is finished except for I haven't woven in the underarm grafting ends. And I knit this in Amelia A. Philomene Madame Philippon yarn in the color Mayflower, and it's 50% cotton, 50% superwash merino. Didn't realize it was superwash when I got it, and then made some adjustments on the fly to avoid having it grow like crazy, because cotton is a fabric that likes to grow, superwash merino is a fabric that likes to grow, and I was concerned for the fit I was going to get having them together. But overall, I really like the object that I got, but there were some moments in this pattern that were in knitting this pattern that were quite stressful, mostly of my own doing. I fully failed to read the instructions properly like 2 or 3 times and wound up in a fair amount of trouble. And I felt really stupid about it because, like, where's my reading comprehension? But then I watched Jenny of Future Fibers talk about this pattern and then heard that she made the exact same mistake, and I felt a little bit better about it. But you're supposed to move the beginning of round marker when you're doing this lace here. Wow, it looks so see-through on camera. It doesn't in person. Maybe I should change and like wear a dark undershirt or something, but I'm just gonna roll with it for now. Yeah, you're supposed to change the beginning of round marker when you're doing the lace for the body. And that information is at the bottom, sorry, at the top of the page after it says, start doing the lace repeat as specified on the chart. So I just scrolled down the part of the pattern where the chart was and started knitting from that. I didn't keep reading the actual written instructions of the pattern. And then as a result, it was I had such a hard time lining up these triangles in that pattern because I was like, this doesn't look right. Why is it always off? Because I didn't have beginning of round in the right place. And it's at the top of the page. It's not even poorly formatted in my opinion. It's just like they ran out of space on one page and put it on the next, and if I had read through properly, I would have realized that. I just immediately went to the chart and started going, and if I had not done that, I would have had a much easier and faster time making this pattern. So that's on me, but if you decide to make this, just keep that in mind. I also, as a result of that, was placing some of the eyelets poorly. It took me a while to realize that each of these decreases should line up with the one before it. So down here, they don't. They're kind of all over the place. I also sometimes just would randomly decrease stitches or add stitches because I would mess up the repeat and then my stitch count would be off, in part because the beginning of round marker was off. So honestly, it's a miracle that I had the stitch counts that I needed by the time I got to the part where I'm supposed to add the underarms. And I think that if I had less knitting experience than I do at this time, I would have really struggled, but I had the confidence to just kind of keep going and hope for the best. There's also a few rounds of triangles that are kind of offset and don't have the proper diagonal, but it's kind of hard for me to find them when I look at it, and so I decided that's okay. But I like this pattern. I don't actually think it's confusing. I just didn't do a good job reading, which is really on me. There is one single line in this entire pattern that I didn't understand and seemed incorrect, so I did something a different way, but I couldn't find any, and there's like almost 300 projects for this on Ravelry. It's a pretty popular pattern. It was originally published in Lina magazine, and then Unit did their knit along, and there was a discount code for the pattern and a discount on the kits that they sell for this pattern. This was one of, and that was sponsored. And I don't think I saw anybody who had the same problem. There was a line where, okay, so this is knit bottom up. I don't get all the fear of bottom up projects, yes, you have a little bit less control, but I think they're really pleasant to knit. I really liked knitting these two sleeves, which are both about 1 centimeter or 2 longer than they're supposed to be, because again, I didn't read properly. I think it's really nice to get them done quickly. They act as a type of gauge swatch, and then you connect them, which feels like magic, and then you're decreasing towards the neck, which is so satisfying because it doesn't take very long and you have fewer and fewer stitches with each row, and you feel like you're getting faster and faster, and you can try it on from the bottom up, and that's really fun. But aside from all that, there was a line where you join the sleeves to the body where you move the beginning of round marker again, and then you slip a whole bunch of stitches that seem to me to be unworked stitches to be the bottom of the underarm, and then knit the back, and then add the sleeve, put the stitches underneath on hold, but then you're knitting the top ones so you don't have a weird gap, and then you knit across the front, and then you put the stitches on hold. And this is probably confusing and poorly explained, but the point of the thing that was getting to me was like, okay, but if I put the stitches on hold unworked and then work the back, I'm not leaving those stitches to be on the underarm. Like, it was going to create a pocket like this from worked stitches, unworked stitches, where the working yarn would connect to keep going. So I ignored that, added the sleeve on top, knit those, put the sleeve stitches underneath on hold, so that the working yarn continued in a way where there wasn't going to be a bit where it was like scrunched, because working yarn, stitches on hold, working yarn, it would have jumped it. I don't know if that makes any sense. I think I looked at this pattern for so long, because at this point I'd realized the mistakes I had been making up until this point, and so I was really like, pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. I cannot compute those instructions. The only thing that makes sense to me is that when you put the stitches on hold, you were actually supposed to have worked them and then go back and put them on hold, but it didn't say that, and I didn't want to mess with it, so I just moved it, and it turned out to be totally fine. I like the thicker raglan line along the decreases. I liked how these kind of turned up, and it was really nice to work the yoke because you have the sleeves that are entirely stockinette, so it felt like a nice break. Once I realized how I was supposed to be establishing these triangles at the top, it was so much easier and faster and more fun, and I didn't even really have to look at the chart. It's just, I erred because of my own mistakes. But to combat the fact that I'm increasingly a looser knitter, I went down a needle size for this pattern. And I'm so grateful that I did, because I didn't realize about the superwash content until after I knit both sleeves, and I think that knitting this at a slightly tighter gauge helped me a little bit. It's meant to be a 24 stitch gauge. I think I'm at a 25 stitch in stockinette, and I really like it. I also really like the fit, except I think I knit it longer than I wanted to. When I blocked this, I think I soaked it for a grand old total of 5 minutes. I really didn't want it to expand. And then I was fully prepared to put this in the dryer or just give it to my mom if it ended up being a different size than I wanted. And so I soaked it for 5 minutes, rolled it carefully to dry, and then I put it down, and I tried to balance giving it enough space to have the eyelets open up and stop being scrunched and strange, but also making sure I wasn't stretching it in any way. And I'm really happy with how that worked out in terms of fit. Looks like this. I would have knit the body a little bit shorter if I had realized. I also knit the body rib shorter. It's meant to be a really substantial rib and then a cropped fit. And that's the one thing about bottom-up knits that you can't really account for as easily. So I chopped off, or I didn't do, like 1.5 inches of ribbing, and then I added 2 more rows of triangles before doing the sleeves addition as opposed to separation. And something that I really like about this pattern, the original samples are meant to be more fitted and more cropped, and as a result they have something of a 40s or 50s like grease blouse, like sweater blouse look. I wanted that, and then this is a little bit baggier than I wanted, but I find that I should have just left those 2 rows of triangles out, and instead the way I prefer to wear it is tucking it in. So I'll do that and show you. I think this looks nicer, but if I cropped it, then I wouldn't be able to tuck it anymore, so I'm gonna leave it the way that it is and just wear it tucked. But I wanted to show you what it really looked like long for transparency reasons. I also added short row shaping to the back because I had just finished my rib lace raglan and I wanted to avoid that little bit of choking. I did this pretty haphazardly and it worked out pretty well. I think I did about 6 short rows because, again, it's such a small stitch gauge that I wanted to do just a little bit more, and I really love the fit of it. I honestly think it would have been fine if I hadn't. I also did a few more rounds of decreases to bring in the neck more because I thought that now that I wasn't going to have the same height at the front and the back and it wouldn't be as choky, I wanted to make sure I had some things done to counter the natural growing and sagging of a neckline, especially in a cotton superwash blend. And I'm really happy with all of those modifications. It was pretty easy to sneak in short rows at the back of the neck because you stop, also I think it depends on the size, but you stop the chart not at the end of a full repeat, depending on which size you're knitting, or where, depending on which size you're knitting, to do the neckline. So what I did was on the back, I just kept going back and forth and knit a full chart repeat for the back. And it looks normal because it is what the chart's supposed to look like, it just doesn't match the front. And then because the sleeves are stockinette, it's pretty easy to hide that because you don't have a sudden jog on the sleeves where like you have a full triangle repeat and a half triangle repeat right next to each other. So that's an easy modification if you would like to. When I get around to it, I will post this to Ravelry and include that information. But I'm really happy that Unit reached out and sent this to me because I had a good time knitting it and I think I'll get a lot of wear out of it this fall. I think it looks really cute tucked in, really into this color, and the 50-50 content, again, much like my rib lace raglan, has been very good for this highly variable weather, but today's such a beautiful day. So those are all of my finished objects, and I think we'll take a brief break from knitting to show you my spinning finished objects / works in progress because I've started spinning. I bought a drop spindle at Twist Fiber Festival and with the intention of learning how to spin at some point, and then very soon after I decided no, I would like to learn how to spin now, like immediately. So I went to Wabi Sabi and I got a little bit of spinning fiber. I think this is just the Ashford Corriedale that they sell, that you can get at a lot of different places. And yeah, I think this is funny because every other knitting YouTuber seems to have picked up spinning at the exact same time as me, and most of them are better at it than I am. So in case, if you think that you're about to see good spun yarn, I need to tell you, you are not. But it's a lot of fun, and it's been really fun to try something new, engage more deeply with fiber crafts and wool and yarn, and also watch everybody else who's at a similar place as me in spinning. It's also been really good for getting into audiobooks finally, because I want to see what I'm doing when I'm spinning, and I've always struggled having somebody narrate something to me. I've always just wanted to read it myself in my own inner voice, but that's really neither here nor there. I started spinning. I am not good at it. I really think I would have benefited from taking a class, like a one-day workshop, because so much of what I learned is from via trial and error, but mostly error. I watched a bunch of tutorials at the beginning that were like the more popular tutorials on YouTube for these things, and then through watching people's podcasts and like trying to Google the right terms to find answers to my problems, I learned about a bunch of things that I should have been doing this whole time. So here are some skeins of yarn. I use the term yarn really loosely because this is basically just like thinner bits of the fiber that I got in the shape of a hank, because like it's really hard to call a lot of this stuff yarn. Like this is the fiber, the Corriedale, and then these are my first 3 mini hanks. Like, come on, that's barely spun. That's barely plied. So when I did these, I didn't know that I should be splitting the fiber into halves or quarters or thirds before attempting to spin it. I didn't know what a drafting triangle was. I didn't know about pre-drafting. I didn't think to use a leader. I didn't know how to avoid that thick and thin slub texture that comes from not having a good not pre-drafting well and not understanding my staple length. And they're just fuzz, man. Like, they're pretty fuzz and I made them myself, but this is really only very generously called yarn. I'm okay with that. I knew that was going to happen because that's what happens when you're a beginner and you try something new. But then, after spending a lot of time reading and then watching other people, like I was just watching an Airy Knits video where she started spinning and she was like, yeah, so I was doing a fractal spin and I split my braid in half, and I was like, we're supposed to be doing that? That's also a podcast recommendation for you, Airy Knits, Aerie Knits. She does both knitting and increasingly spinning. She does a lot of really beautiful, bright colors and pastels, really into purple and pink, and I really like her vibe. She has a very infectious enthusiasm for the things that she's talking about, and does a lot of like explore knits colorways. So if that's your vibe, I recommend her. I have been catching up on all her videos, really enjoying the ones where she talks about spinning. But yeah, no, I was literally just watching somebody else's podcast and learning things about spinning by accident, which I mean is great. But then, yeah, I also did not add anywhere close to enough twist while making these because I was just twisting to what I thought I wanted the finished ply to look like, as opposed to intentionally over twisting, knowing that it would come undone a little bit when I plied. Plying, big issue for me, but we'll get there. So yeah, these three, my first ever hand spun, but not a success. But I still love them, and they are still my precious children, and I have a plan for them, but we'll get there. So once I had these three under my belt, I was getting a little bit tired of this color. I also have a vision for this. I have a project, and all these colors kind of go together, but I then did a lot more reading and research, learned about pre-drafting, learned about testing for staple length beforehand, learned about how to control or start learning how to control how thick or thin you are spinning based on the drafting triangle. I don't know if I'm using these terms right, but I think you maybe hopefully understand what I'm talking about. And I spun up this guy, also very thick and thin, also not very good. Also that Ashford Corriedale that I purchased from Wabi Sabi. But this at least looks like yarn compared to this, as you can see. So much fun. I really liked it. Not deterred by being bad at it. And I like it. So from there, I was sick and wanted the interest of something colorful to keep me paying attention to what I was doing. So from there, okay, in the winter, I got a colorful braid of Norwegian Leicester wool in a limited edition, luck of the draw. Emily C. Gillies / House of Wool is the new brand name for Emily C. Gillies, but House of Wool fiber braid in this gradient from like a dark blue to a hot pink. And I didn't show you guys because I wasn't ready to start spinning, and I just kind of wanted to have this because this is one of my favorite color stories, I don't know. And so I thought, okay, I've done a little bit of spinning, I'm ready to try something like this. First of all, Norwegian Leicester wool is different from Corriedale, and I'm learning more quickly about different types of fiber through spinning and working with it in a way that I find very, very interesting and very engaging. This really feels like hair. Like, it's just kind of hairy, and it's rougher. It's a long wool versus Corriedale, which is more fluffy and springy. Like, it feels different. But this color goes with this color. So I spent 4 days, I took my braid and I took it in half into a very long thing and I pre-drafted bit by bit. As I went, I didn't pre-draft the whole thing. And I spun it up over 4 days and then I applied it with itself and oh my goodness, did things go wrong. So at this point, this is what I got from that. At this point, I had gotten a lot better at drafting consistently or spinning more consistently. And I had starting to develop some muscle memory, some sense of it, and I was having a lot of fun. And then, without thinking, I just did what I had been doing for all my previous spins or bobbins or whatever. I applied one end of it with the other end. And the result is a kind of ugly cotton candy, hairy barber pole mess. That's pretty. I don't love that as much, and I don't love that these are together. But I don't know how to fix it at this point. Also, you can tell this is like barely plied. So my singles were consistent, and then when I tried plying it, it felt like to get a balanced energy where it wasn't plying again up onto itself, the finished 2-ply yarn, it had to be really loosely plied, and I think that it's kind of ugly that way. Like, I think that works in other yarns. I was looking through my yarn stash to see what a normal ply is, and I have some that are more loosely plied, but they still look nicer than this. So that was a little discouraging because the colors are really special and I liked this a lot, and it's a limited run. I have more, as you saw. So I then split the second half of that braid into 2 halves, so a quarter of the original braid each, and chose to spin it into a new turtle, and then put this off to the side. I'm going to use the other one and spin that, and then have the 2 dark sides plied together all the way to the light to get a more gradient effect. So you have like colors with like, as opposed to opposite colors with opposite colors, which has a time and place. It's just not what I was expecting. But really, I am concerned about how loosely this is plied, but the energy in the spin or in the yarn is supposed to be balanced. So my sense was to just really, really twist this. For the single, just really, really twist it so that there's a lot more energy, so that when I go and try and ply it, it has a lot more bounce and will hopefully be a more plied and tighter yarn. But I'm really, really hoping that one of you would be able to advise me on this, because I don't know. I also, when I was doing this, it was really fun to realize that I could kind of naturally spin something that's like a bit of a DK weight, because I love knitting with DK weight yarns, but I forgot that the original point of this was to make a tapestry, like a woven one, and I wanted chunkier yarns for it. So I'm thinking I will double up on this and maybe just like spin it with itself and get a cotton candy hairy mess, and then have a thicker one and then a more tightly plied yarn, and then have that to play with. But yeah, so I spun this trying to spin more of a thick single, and then I'm hoping for a heavy worsted or bulky finished product, and then to spin it with another bobbin so that it's more of that pretty gradient barber pole as opposed to this. But I really like spinning. I find it really soothing. There's just something about the consistency of it and the physicality of it that I find rather meditative. Because with knitting, there's so many different stitches that I'm doing. But with this, right now, at this point in time, I just have my little drop spindle and I'm standing, which is good for my back, and I'm just going pew, pew. And I find that really, really enjoyable. Oh, but back to my original point. If I had just attended a workshop, if I had just waited a month and a half for the Ottawa Valley Weavers and Spinners Guild introduction to hand spinning class, I think that all of this would have been covered in the first 2 hours. How do you pre-draft? How do you split things? How do you prep fiber properly to improve your spin? And I think that if I was to attempt to learn how to spin on a wheel or an e-spinner, I would simply just have to force myself to be patient and go to the guild. And I understand that there are a lot of spinning and weaving guilds around the world that offer classes. Also a bunch of craft stores and yarn stores offer classes. And a lot of people seem to pick this up a lot more intuitively than I have, which is fine. I have a long life and a long history of being bad at things, so I'm not easily deterred by it now. But I recommend maybe going to take a class instead of trying by yourself and getting frustrated, because there's kind of a lot that goes into it at the beginning that at least some of the videos that I was watching kind of didn't cover as an essential at the beginning that I thought actually ended up being kind of essential. Not to like shade people. I'm sure that there are other videos that I just wasn't seeing that did cover all these things at the very beginning, as opposed to just, this is how you just flick it and then you put the fiber in. And then I was like, why am I having so many problems? I hope that was something close to coherent, but if anybody has any ideas on how to fix this or how to avoid having such a loosely plied yarn in the future, I would love to hear it. I got more fiber for more spinning, but so reason why, okay. So my vision for all of this, right now, I would like to eventually be able to spin yarn for knitting, but at this point in time, that's not really gonna happen. But I have wanted to get more into weaving. I took a workshop with the Ottawa Valley Weavers and Spinners Guild in February, and there we learned on a rigid heddle, which is a bit more of an intermediate or advanced loom, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I have wanted to, since then, try weaving more. And somebody online on Facebook Marketplace was selling a frame loom, just your pretty basic, it's a set size loom from a Canadian manufacturer that doesn't make them anymore, for a really good price, and also within walking distance of my house, which is unusual for Ottawa and for me. And that was pretty perfect because I knew that my first few spins weren't going to be good. And one thing that kind of annoys me when I learn a new craft is that, of course, I'm going to be bad at it for like a while at the beginning, but I don't want to have just junk in my house because it's a testament to the first time I learned something. I don't really have space for that kind of thing. So I thought, okay, there are all these really pretty woven art tapestries made from roving and really chunky yarns and abstract shapes and pretty colors, and I feel like that would be a very good use for my hand spun yarn, especially my early hand spun yarn that's not going to be very good, in a way where hopefully this wouldn't look like a really bad attempt at hand spinning, but just a really fun chunky bit of roving in a woven tapestry, as is the style. So I got this on Facebook Marketplace. It comes with a bunch of accessories. There's this thingy, and the comb and the needle and all such things. And once I am done spinning all this yarn in this gradient and the blue and the really pale pink, I'm going to make these into a tapestry wall hanging for probably my living room, unless my roommates hate it, and then it'll be on the wall in here. And yeah, I'm going to practice a bit more first because I don't want to jump straight into using my precious first hand spun yarns, but I also checked 4 books out of the library on tapestry weaving and the basics of it, and for beginners, to hopefully learn a little bit and a few more of the stitches before diving in. There's also a bunch of, is it spruce and linen YouTube tutorials for smaller things like mug rugs or bookmarks that I think I will try. The one thing I realized, and this is a pretty large tapestry loom, like for the small hobby ones, not real looms. This is a real loom, not compared to a rigid heddle or a table loom, etc. But the teeth are kind of wide set. So I think I might have to double warp it in order to practice on thinner weights of yarn or do things on thinner weights of yarn to use up my existing stash, because I don't have almost any chunky or bulky weight yarns for future projects beyond this one. But my mother has put in a request for a small rug. She said she is happy to sew woven pieces together because I'm of course limited by the size of the frame. And I'd like to work up to being able to make that for her. And I have some yarns that I think would make a good rug. Briggs & Little, which one of my friends got me a skein of Briggs & Little bulky weight yarn. I forgot the name of the base, but it's an 80% hard wearing wool and 20% nylon. I think that would make a good rug. And yarn goes a bit longer in weaving than it does in knitting. But, so that's basically the spinning to weaving path I'm on right now. I am excited about weaving, but I'm more excited about knitting and spinning right now. I think I might take some time and make a bookmark soon to practice. I made a little trivet, like a pot holder, and it's really ugly, but it works with the loom, and yeah, I'm excited about that. But before we get truly absorbed into talking about my handful of acquisitions, I want to show you my whip. I only really have one, not including the second sock for the porch light sock, and it is a ripple bralette by Jessie May of Jessie Made Designs, using the leftover of this, because I had quite a bit left over, and I find that if I cast on with the leftovers of a project immediately, it gets used and enjoyed as a finished object. But even if I have a project in mind for it, if I just put it in stash, it'll sit there forever and not really get used. So whenever I can and I have a concrete idea for a scrap or leftover project from the yarn that I just finished using, I try and cast it on immediately. This looks tiny because it's scrunched on really small needles, but I started it on magic loop and it actually is pretty big. I'm knitting this one size up from what I would normally and from what my first ripple bralette is like, but 2 or 3 needle sizes down because I wanted a denser fabric. The original is knit at a pretty loose gauge, which is pretty typical for a lot of Jessie May patterns, especially her earlier ones. And for the longevity of the garment and also counteracting the stretch of the superwash and the cotton, I wanted it at a tighter gauge. But I really like the ripple bralette. Like I just said, I knit one in the past and I find it, oh my goodness, there's so much fiber in the air right now from having whipped all those fiber skeins all over the place. Okay. I made one of these 2 winters ago. I liked it. I like it as an undershirt or a base layer underneath non-wool store-bought clothing that's thick enough that you can't see that I'm wearing this kind of camisole ripple bralette underneath, but thin enough that they're not actually warm, or a little top with another actual bra underneath for going out. However, despite being called a bralette, don't expect any amount of support from this. It kind of brings things in a little bit if you have a smaller chest. It certainly is not going to lift. And if you follow the pattern as written, it will really only cover your bust. If you want something that's going to be longer line or more of a camisole, you're going to have to add a few inches, which is what I will be doing. But it's just 3x3 rib. It's really relaxing. I like it. And I have a good amount left in this to get a ripple bralette out of it, which I think will be really, really good in a superwash merino and cotton blend. Be easy to wash, which is good for something that's next to skin. It will be a good, I think the cotton and the wool interacting together will have me well regulated temperature-wise. And it'll work underneath a lot of my thicker work blouses that are darker, but not very warm. So that's what I'm currently working on. I haven't cast on anything else that's a more exciting or, I don't know, involved project because I have 2 that I'm going to be casting on very soon and I have knit swatches for. Just last night, actually. Object number 3 or 4? Object number 4 in this color is my Pippin sweater swatch, which is knit in sand stitch, which is kind of like broken moss stitch. You do the alternating knit purl, and then you switch, like you knit the purls and purl the knits, but then broken up by lines of knit stitches in between. I've had this pattern for a little while, for a year. It came out a little bit less than a year ago. because I test knit for Sophie Hemmings, the designer of the Pippin sweater. And anytime you test for her, she gives you 3 free patterns in addition to the one that you helped test. So this is one of the ones that I chose, and I've been waiting to cast this on for months. I just kept not getting around to it. And it really felt like this is the time. I wanted to use the yarn, I wanted to have this sweater. So I swatched. I swatched on the recommended needle size, and I'm 2 stitches too loose. So I'm gonna go down 1 needle size in hopes that I'll hit a 21 stitch gauge as opposed to the 22 that's recommended in the pattern, because I don't actually have enough yarn for the size I'm supposed to knit as recommended in the pattern, and then I'm hoping this allows me to stretch what I have a little bit more. And then I knit a swatch in my Richard Sheep yarn to prep for my Lana vest cast on, which I will be casting on a week today with my friend Charlotte for our 2-person Fisherman Knit Fall knit along, because I wanted to get a sense of what this was like to work with. I love the color, but the Lana vest, I'm supposed to have 18 stitches in stock in it, and I have 14 on the recommended needle size, in part because this is a thicker yarn, and in part because I am increasingly a looser knitter, which is good for the health of my hands and wrists, and also I think reflects that I'm just doing better mentally than when I started knitting. But it means I'm gonna have to go down, I think, a needle size, and then I'm a little stuck because I'm already going to be knitting the smallest size of this vest. It has 5 sizes and it's not a very wide size range. Okay, so it's between 6 and 12 inches of positive ease for the recommended sizing. For me, I will be at the 12 inches of ease for the smallest size. And for most patterns, I knit the 2nd or 3rd or sometimes even 4th size. So that's not great on the smaller end. And then on the larger end, I think this only goes up to like a 52-inch bust or a 54-inch bust. Again, if you only choose to have 6 inches of positive ease. And I mean, there's always ways of messing with gauge and getting a different size. That's what I did with both of my finished garments today. I will be doing that a little bit with this too. But it does mean that we have more limited options when it comes to, I want to knit it in this, I'm way off gauge. I would probably have to go down to a 4.5 or a 4mm needle to get 18 stitches in this yarn, which I think would be very painful to knit and just too tight and not what this yarn wants. So I'm gonna see what happens. But it's very good to have this information before I cast on. And this is just, it was a lot of fun to knit, and I love this texture. It's very pretty. So yes, this I'm waiting to cast on in a week. I'd like to finish my Ripple bralette by then and be able to commit to this. I will probably cast this on as soon as I finish my Ripple bralette or if I get bored. And I will continue attempting to improve in my spinning until then. I've also done a little bit more for my wall decor project. I knit more leaves and started crocheting flowers. If I can find any in this bag. Oh, here's one. Here's one of my crochet flowers for that. But this is a long-term project that I mostly work on whenever I'm struck with the fancy for it. But okay, acquisitions. I got 4 or 5 skeins of double Sunday in the color royal blue to make a dicky or a collar or a neck for my mom per her request. She wanted blue, and I have a mixed relationship with double Sunday, but it creates really nice final garments, and I think that this softness would be good for my mom. I also know that apparently it's not superwash, but it is, you can wash it in a machine on like cold and delicate or something, which I think is also good for my mom. She wanted a darker blue than this, but the darker blue than this is Sailor in the Dark, which is basically, it's such a dark navy, it's almost black, which I thought would kind of clash, but like you can't really wear it with a lot of other blues because it'll look like black. You can't wear it with black because it'll look like oh, you got dressed in the dark and you didn't realize that one of your objects was actually blue. Also, my mom, ever since I was little, has told me not to wear too many dark objects and winter gear because cars can't see you and it's tough when it gets dark so early. So I'm heeding her own advice and making her something that's a lot brighter instead. So I got 4 skeins of this, or 5. Whatever makes sense for the yardage requirements for a neck, from Knit-O-Matic in Toronto using the last of my gift card from my mom. And I'm really excited to start that probably in October when I get tired of all the cables and textures that I will be making for myself. And I got from House of Wool, which is the Emily C. Gillies rebrand, this braid of Polworth for spinning. This is Polworth. It's automatically very soft at first touch, and once I get better at spinning and I've sorted out this plying and twist issue, I'd like to spin this up to make it into something that I would knit with. As contrast, in a colorwork sweater, I'm thinking the Care sweater by Rebecca Clow of the Crayabea. I think that that would be really nice with a charcoal gray. Except my one concern is that the parts that align with this will not show up with the, will not provide enough contrast, but we'll see. So I got this because Emily launched the rebrand of her site. It's now houseofwool.ca as opposed to emilycgillies.ca. And I was just so excited about spinning, I wanted some. I also got this, which is, oh, this is the colorway Epilogue. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. On Polworth. And this is the colorway Foliage on the Norwegian Leicester wool, much like the one I was spinning before. Maybe for an autumnal tapestry, that could be really nice, as opposed to my winter sunset tapestry with the blues and the pinks that I have. I also see that Emily is herself making a pair of socks with this, and I feel like this would be a great hard-wearing pair of socks. I just don't trust myself to spin strongly enough to make hard-wearing socks like they do. So that's something else that I could do, but isn't this just so perfect for foliage? And this was also only like $18 or $22. Very good price for a lot of fun. 100 grams. Also 100 grams. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I got one more braid because apparently I cannot be stopped. I told myself I will not buy any more yarns, so apparently my brain immediately went, okay, so we make our own yarn and that doesn't count. But I also got this. This is the very last braid that they had at Knit-O-Matic, which is good because I love it. And this is Fleece Artist Merino Sliver. It's 100% merino in the color Sangria, which is just gorgeous. I think I will spin this last because I've heard that merino is trickier to spin because it has a shorter staple length than Norwegian Leicester wool, Corriedale, or Polworth. But I think I would also like to do this for knitting. So I'm going to practice on everything else and then get around to this. This was also pretty affordable. It was, well, I guess it feels affordable because I use my gift card, but it's also $22. And Fleece Artist is also based out in the Maritimes, much like Emily of House of Wool, who did all the other spinning fiber that I showed you. So I've got a lot of spinning to do, I've got a lot of knitting to do, and I've got some weaving to do. And I think I shall return to those now. It's a beautiful Saturday. I think I'm gonna go for a walk and enjoy life. Okay, what have you been working on? If you are a spinner, please tell me what to do to fix my current spinning problems. Do you like spinning? Do you have any interest in spinning if you're not a spinner? And it's almost the equinox. Shana Tova, if anybody celebrates. And we'll talk again soon. Okay, alright, I hope this was fun to watch. Sorry about the all over the place energy.